Welcome back. You're still watching the Daily Debate, and I'm honored to be having with me over the program for tonight Dr. Yasser Thabet. Dr. Yasser, thank you very much once again for being with us tonight. We were speaking about the violations from the Israeli side after the peace summit and the agreement that took place in Sharm el-Sheikh according to the proposal of the US President Donald Trump, and of course the summit was chaired by President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi. How do you see those violations and the rejection of Egypt, the Arab countries and the Islamic countries towards those violations?
It's a fact that this agreement to stop the war and the aggression on Gaza is one of the main achievements which has been achieved lately, and Egypt was playing a major role in reaching this agreement and making sure that it is hosting this agreement in the presence of the American President Donald Trump and other leaders, world leaders. But we must say that the Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu is opposing all these steps. He was under the pressure to reach out to accept such an agreement, and now his government is trying to sabotage all these agreements by making sure that it goes back to war and aggression, and it is now putting an eye on the annexation of West Bank, trying to make sure that this instability is there in the region, which helps the Israeli government to work as it's used to do by its malpractices and the aggressions and the terrorist even attacks against civilians, targeting all these civilians in the West Bank and Gaza. I'm sure that the Egyptian stance is very steady towards its commitment to the international law and making sure that the Palestinian cause is heard, and make sure that the world is aware of the danger of accepting the Israeli practices and laws. And I think now Egypt is making some success in this and making sure that even the US is opposing the Israeli steps towards the annexation of West Bank and returning back to the instability in the Gaza Strip.
Yes, Dr. Yasser, you mentioned a number of important topics. One of them is the Palestinian cause and the future of the state of Palestine, because we have seen over the past couple of months, especially within the meetings at the United Nations General Assembly and then the Sharm el-Sheikh Peace Summit, there was a recognition by a number of big countries of the Palestinian state, including France, the United Kingdom, Canada, Australia, Portugal. They recognized the state of Palestine. On the other hand, we did see those violations, the decisions by Israel after the peace summit to be putting more hurdles against the solution of a two-state solution for the Middle East in general and for Palestine in specific. Do you think that this will be affecting the future of the two-state solution?
Despite all the tragedy and the trauma that was made during the last 3 years, let's say 3 years, due to the Israeli aggression after the 7th of October attacks or operation, we must say that this recognition of the Palestinian state is a step forward, and it's an international step, huge step, to make sure that this Palestinian cause is now heard by the international community, and making sure that the Palestinians get their own legitimate state according to the UN resolutions 338, 242 and other resolution 181. All these resolutions were made by the UN, and now it's the time to implement all these international UN resolutions, and to make sure that the Palestinian state is it's a de facto right now, but we must gain the international recognition which took place lately, and what took place recently as well is that the people, the international society is now protesting all these aggressions and bombing and killing and trying to starve the Palestinians, especially in Gaza Strip. I think it's a huge step forward, and it's helping the Palestinian cause to be in the forefront of the main causes that the international society or the global society adopts.
On another front, how do you see the future of bilateral ties between Israel and the aforementioned states who acknowledged the Palestinians' right to be having a state, including, for example, the French President Emmanuel Macron and the incident that took place at the United Nations General Assembly meetings in New York, for example? This is giving us an indication of the bilateral ties between the United States and France, for example, between the United States and Turkey, for another example. But how do you see the future of the bilateral ties between Israel and those states, especially that today we have seen the statements of the Foreign Minister of Israel, Gideon Saar, saying that he would not accept that Turkish forces will be a part of the task force that will be in the Gaza Strip, according to the stances, the previous stances of the Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan?
Israel is trying to hinder all and making obstacles to sabotage the agreement which was reached and signed in Sharm el-Sheikh. And again, the international community and the world now is aware of the Palestinian cause. And now the main countries, and one of the main countries is France right now, and even the UK is making some steps forward towards the Palestinian state as well, and this is something which usually is not the one which we expect from certain countries like UK or even France. I think this helps the Palestinians to get their own state according to international law and UN resolutions, and I think that Israel is now facing a huge pressure that is imposed by the main countries in the West as well, to raise this matter and make sure that this cause, which is one of the last conflicts in the world, or the even oldest conflicts in the world right until now, we have to reach out a solution which is legitimate and just for the Palestinians to exist with others as well.
Is this pressure against the United States unprecedented by, I wouldn't say just the governments of the big countries or the major powers all over the world, but the peoples of those nations? Because in the past few months, more specifically, or maybe to a wider extent, the past 2 years, we have seen protests all over Europe, for example, of course all over the Middle East, in Rome, in London, in different parts of Europe. We have seen pressure on the popular level against the governments, against their governments, and in turn the governments are pressuring the US President Donald Trump to be getting us to where we are right now, to be having a ceasefire, to be stopping the bloodshed, to be stopping the genocide against the Palestinians. What is the role of the people, and more specifically with the rise of the social media?
No one can argue that the people has the power, and I think the people right now in the West, whether in Europe, US or other countries as well, is imposing a huge pressure on governments, especially the US administration, to make sure that this Palestinian issue is solved and the Palestinian cause is solved as well. And it is manifested by three ways. One is the protests, as you mentioned. Secondly is the resignations of certain figures, and very important figures, whether in the US administration or other administration, in protest of what's taking place or took place in Gaza as well. And the third one is the kind of consensus which took place in the UN, which made the world more aware that the Palestinian state is something which would help to bring back stability to the Middle East, which is a very important, a crucial region for the world.
And we have seen the regional tensions soaring after the past 2 years and the genocide war that took place in the Gaza Strip by the Israeli occupation forces. What about the timing of those 2 draft laws by the Knesset, especially during those regional tensions? Is expected to be having those draft laws to be passed now? Is the timing important? Is it just a coincidence?
No, it's not a coincidence. I think that, again, the Israeli government is trying all the possible ways to stay in power, especially Benjamin Netanyahu's government. And again, he is trying to make sure that all the militants, from the right militants in the Israeli government, is on his side, to make sure that he continues in position and not to be brought to trial, which he's threatened to face if he left the government as well. And he is trying to make sure that the greater Israel is a living dream in the Israelis' mindset as well. And I think that Israel is trying to compensate its failure in Gaza, and I'm making sure that it's a huge failure, as they managed to kill, arrest and do everything. But again, the reputation of the Israeli government has been, has been stained in the world. And again, the Israeli government is under a huge pressure from the world right now. And I don't think that the popularity of the Israeli government is as before in the world. So it's trying again to make sure that it's, the Israeli mentality is making sure that instability is in its favor. So it's trying all the possible ways and tactics to make this instability goes on.
Now, are those tactics working now to be depicting an image which has always been the case, to be saying something which is not true in Israel or in Palestine, more specifically, that this is our land and we were promised this land 3,000 years ago? So depicting an image that is not even there, is it working now, especially with the people knowing the truth?
I think it's like forging history, the manipulation and all this were exposed lately to the world. People started to read and to review the whole history for the Israel, and now the Zionism, especially Zionism, is facing a huge dilemma because of the Israeli practices, and people were saying we are Israelis, we are Zionists, and there is no difference between both of them. Now they are trying to distance themselves even from Zionism, because it's now stained in the world, international world. And I think what's taking place right now is something which is a huge test for the Israeli government and for the Israeli state, which will be manifested in the coming few years.
You mentioned that popularity is very important for the Israeli officials. How unpopular currently is the Prime Minister of Israel, Benjamin Netanyahu, and specifically after the end of the genocide war for the past 2 years? Economically, things are not going well. He has a lot of legal cases even against him before the genocide war. What are the rates of popularity for Netanyahu now?
Inside Israel, he's facing a big protests, and we have witnessed protests even around his headquarters, and the government as well, and the Knesset. Abroad, I think the West has protested, went to streets, the governments, the universities all around the world were protesting against the Israeli practices and aggression, especially against women, the children, and starving the Gaza people, more than around 2 million people, and making sure that this war stops. I think the world has become more aware of the Israeli tactics, aggression, and even history in the recent 2 years, a couple of years. And I think now there is kind of review in the world of the whole Israeli situation, and I think the Israeli propaganda has as well failed in this test due to the facts that people were witnessing through the TV and the media.
How do you assess the role of the Egyptian diplomacy to be ending the aggression against the Palestinians in the Gaza Strip? And I wouldn't say diplomacy just with the efforts of Foreign Minister Badr Abdulati, but on the presidential level by President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi even a couple of days ago at the inauguration or at the show that took place at the new administrative capital, the Arts and Culture City. President al-Sisi spoke about the importance of reaching a ceasefire in Gaza. Within the visit of the Grand Imam of Al-Azhar, Dr. Ahmad al-Tayyib, to Rome and the Vatican, he spoke about the importance of ending the genocide war against the Palestinians in the Gaza Strip and to be having more tolerance and more peace and better peace in the region. So it's not just about the efforts of the foreign ministry, but on the presidential level, on the level of the Grand Imam, on the popular level, on social media for the Egyptians. How would you assess the efforts of Egypt in general, diplomatically, to be getting to where we are today?
I must say that all what took place lately in Egypt and the Arab region proves again that all the geopolitics theorists are right, that only powerful countries and states can be mediating in conflicts. As Egypt was leading from the very first point of the aggression, all the mediation to stop this war and hold the war and stop the aggression against the Palestinian people in Gaza, and even making sure that nothing happens as well in West Bank. I think Egypt was standing still, and the interview of Khalil Haya, one of the main leaders of Hamas, in Sharm el-Sheikh, proved that Egypt can say to Israel that no one can touch anyone, even those who are coming to negotiate under the Egyptian, on the Egyptian land. And it proved again that Egypt is a powerful country and can protect peace and bring peace even to the Middle East, despite of all the hindrances and obstacles which were made by the Israeli government, which was maneuvering from the very first point to try to stop and even refute all the ways to reach such an agreement. But again, they were brought to the table and they were forced to accept such an agreement, because the Egyptian stance was very strong from the beginning, and the Egyptian powerful state was led by President Sisi, was standing behind such an agreement under the eyes of the whole world.
Doctor, you mentioned that only strong countries can be mediating, especially within such a huge conflict between Israel and Hamas in the Gaza Strip. But we have seen what happened, and of course we did see the US President Donald Trump commending the efforts of Egypt and Turkey and the Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan in Sharm el-Sheikh. But what does this say about the bilateral relations between Israel and Qatar, especially after the strikes that took place against the senior Hamas figures in Doha?
President Trump is trying to fix all what took place in Qatar, especially the strikes, Israeli strikes against Hamas leaders in Qatar, and he's trying to bring back the Qataris as allies to the US, and again trying to fix all what was sabotaged by the Israeli government. Again, this is one of the Trump's plans to fix such a problem, which was caused by Benjamin Netanyahu, who was even trying to make sure that it will be repeated again. But this threat was stopped by the US pressure, as Qatar is one of the main allies as well to the US, and this is kind of the diplomacy made and sponsored by Trump to make sure that he will not lose such an ally in the region as Qatar.
to be rejecting the practices of Israel, and more specifically the draft laws passed by the Knesset to be having more Israeli territorial sovereignty over the West Bank and the annexation of the West Bank in the future. How do you see the role of Egypt in coordination with the Arab League and in cooperation with the Organization of the Islamic Cooperation to be rejecting those practices?
Egypt has a very firm stance against all these Israeli decisions and even maneuvers, and I think that, imagine the Arab world without Egypt. This would be a piece of cake for the Israelis, and I think that Egypt is the main country and state in the Middle East which is stopping and halting all the Israeli plans to annex and put some sovereignty on the West Bank, and such plans wouldn't be successful. And even if they made such decisions, I think the Egyptian stance will stop this from being implemented in the future.
On the other hand, how do you see the role of the United Nations in this conflict nowadays, especially after having a deal and reaching an agreement in Sharm el-Sheikh?
I must say that the UN resolutions are important for making sure that this is the international cover for any step forward to implement peace and justice in the Middle East, and to protect the Palestinians and protect their legitimate rights for an independent state according to the two states plan or even suggestion. And I am sure that such a stance is at least a diplomatic situation which we need to protect the rights of the Palestinians against all the plans and tactics and even maneuvers which usually Israel tends to do.
Of course, we are trying to reach one phase after the other, trying to implement one phase after the other after reaching an agreement in Sharm el-Sheikh to be ending the genocide war against Palestinians. But this leads us to a very important stage, which is the reconstruction of the Gaza Strip, the recovery, the development for the benefit of the innocent Palestinians in the Gaza Strip. How do you see the efforts of Egypt in this field? Because we will be hosting an international conference for the reconstruction and the recovery of the Gaza Strip.
Despite the huge, kind of destruction that was made, and which have with horrible scenes we have seen on TV, and again, despite of the whole aggression of the Israelis, I think Gaza will be back, and the Palestinians, under the whole pressures, stayed in their country, on their land, and refused all the plans to evacuate the Palestinians from the Gaza Strip. And I think that the reconstruction will take place, and the international society will help, especially Egypt and the main Arab countries as well, will help in supporting and financing such efforts. And even Egypt, this took place before and it will bring back again. Egypt is willing to participate strongly in the reconstruction of Gaza Strip, and as the Palestinians are sticking to their rights, I think Egypt as well is having a firm stance to help the Palestinians until they get their own legitimate rights.
Yes, and speaking about Egypt in specific for this month and for the next month, because the reconstruction and the recovery conference will be taking place in the month of November. And in the past weeks, in the past couple of weeks, we have seen the Sharm el-Sheikh Peace Summit taking place in Sharm el-Sheikh. Next Saturday, on the 1st of November, we'll be having the inauguration of the GEM, the Grand Egyptian Museum, which is the largest museum ever built for one civilization, for one culture, which is the ancient Egyptian civilization. What does this say about the status, the strength of Egypt in the region to be doing one thing after the other, to be having one achievement after the other in the space of weeks?
The greater picture affirms that Egypt is the main country in the Middle East, and it will be the main player and the main strategic player in both Africa and the Middle East. It is and it will be as usual because of its location, its role, and its influence in the region. And I think that as the Arabs as well is supporting Egypt as the leader of the region, even Africa knows that Egypt is one of the main countries in the continent, and Egypt will play its role, take all the just causes until it's implemented and done. And as Egypt is tending to use diplomacy with the power of the country to make sure that all the rights are made and implemented in both Africa and the Middle East.
And speaking of diplomacy and talks, we have seen over the past week reconciliation efforts between the Palestinian factions to be getting to a unified front. The talks taking place here in Cairo. How do you see the outcomes of those talks?
Egypt is not a country which stays waits for the reactions. It's a country which takes initiatives, and it's always like this. Egypt doesn't stop. Egypt knows that the Palestinians are in the crossroads and they need to unite themselves. Solidarity and unity is one of the key words right now for the Palestinians to face all the dangers, and that's why. And I think that it's very difficult for any Arab country to gather all these Palestinian factions to the table. Egypt did so, and it as usual, and it made sure that the Palestinians stay and discuss behind closed doors all the dangers, all the challenges they are facing, to make sure that unity is the way that they should go.
Can those talks lead to solidarity, lead to unity for once?
I think it will help. It will help to bridge the gaps and help all these factions to get together, especially that we know that there is a step forward now. There is a kind of transition of power even in the Palestinian Authority, and they are discussing right now what's next after Mahmoud Abbas, President Mahmoud Abbas, and even it was close that they decided to choose his deputy Hussein al-Sheikh. And we must say that this is one of the things that we must discuss. Who is next in the Palestinian Authority? And it was discussed closely, and as well the unity and bridging the gap. You can't erase all the differences between the Palestinian factions, but they have to unite under the interests of the Palestinian people. And I think this meeting, which was held in Egypt, is a step forward to make sure that it will take place.
What's next for the Palestinian Authority? What's next for Hamas? Because there is a plan, a 20-point plan. What does this say about the future of Hamas in the Gaza Strip? Because we have heard that there will be a an international transitional council ruling over the Gaza Strip. So what does this say about the future of Hamas? And more specifically, are they laying down their arms? Are they giving up on their weapons?
I think it's a liquid situation in the Gaza Strip, but again, you can't take out Hamas from Gaza, especially from power. But I think they are open for talks, for sharing the power, making sure that maybe an election would be held. Maybe it's a kind of this one. I'm not sure about laying their forces, but again, they will not be as powerful as before, but they are open for making sure that all factions, especially Fatah, is taking place in Gaza, not as before. And I think that the people of Gaza will decide determine their future. And the meeting that was held in Egypt is a step forward to make sure that the Gazans and the Palestinians as well decide the future of the Palestinian people.
Can the Palestinians in the Gaza Strip choose something else? Is there something else to choose other than Hamas in the Gaza Strip?
Maybe at least sharing power. Maybe one of the reasons that such a meeting was held, that they should discuss openly the future of Hamas and the future of who rules the Gaza Strip. And I think they are open now more than before, more than ever even. From the 90s until now, the Hamas was in power in Gaza Strip, especially in Gaza Strip. But I think now they are open for this. But they will not put down their weapon. But again, they will lower the presence and the power, and they will share the power for the benefit and the sake of the Palestinians.
And the same would happen with Hezbollah in Lebanon?
This will take place eventually, especially that Hezbollah was has been weakened in the last 2 years, especially after the Israeli strikes, the operations as well, and the armament, U.S. armament for the Lebanese army, and I think this will take place eventually.
On the other hand, how can Egypt be reviving talks between the Israelis and the Palestinians for the two-state solution? Do you think it is possible?
Again, despite all the Israeli doubts, I think Egypt is the one who is capable of such gathering both countries or both sides to the table, and I think this will happen. This will happen in the future because it's important and crucial for both sides to sit and discuss things, discuss details, discuss the future, discuss how they will deal with each other. And I think that bringing them to the table under the Egyptian on the Egyptian land as well and auspices, I think this will help, because putting them under the pressure of other countries and other places, this will put more pressure on the Palestinians. But I think that even Hamas itself is trusting Egypt more than many other countries in the region, and Israel as well knows that Egypt is the main country in the Middle East. This will help to bring them back to the discussions and negotiations about the future, whether for the West Bank or Gaza Strip.
We have spoken about the future of the head of the Palestinian Authority, President Mahmoud Abbas of Palestine. We have spoken about the future of Hamas in the Gaza Strip. But what about the future, the political future of the Israeli Prime Minister? Do you think he is safe?
No, he's not safe, and he knows that, and he's trying his best to stay in power, because if he left the government, he knows very well that he will face trials, and he is accused from several parties and several authorities of corruption and financial issues, and I think he knows very well that his stance will be weakened if he left power. That's why he's trying to keep such aggression and war alive, because this is the way he stays in power.
On the other hand, how do you see the reaction of the international community? It's not just about Egypt or the Arab world or the Islamic countries as well. What about the international community towards the decisions and the draft laws passed by the Knesset for the annexation of the West Bank?
It's very clear for me that the international society is not feeling that this is the right step, and it finds a problem in both the timing and the decision itself. So we are talking about the bad timing, which is made intentionally by the Israeli government, and the plans of making sure that instability goes back, and protests as well, because this would help only the Israeli government led by Netanyahu, and would help all the militants such as Smotrich and Ben-Gvir to lead the rightists or the extremists in Israel for more threatenings of the region. And I think that the international society is aware that such steps and decisions will make the region in danger, on the verge of being threatened of more war strikes, operations, and this will catch, the fire will catch even the West in a way or another, and that's why they are trying to stop this and play the role of firefighters to make sure that stability is there in the region and implemented in the region. And we hope that this will really be stopped and halted from the very beginning. And I'm not sure, but I think that the U.S. administration is as well is aware that this is not the right step or even the right timing to do such a step.
Doctor, within our discussion for tonight, you have said that there was a displacement rejection by the Egyptian president. The idea of displacing the Palestinians and moving them from the Gaza Strip to Egypt, to Jordan, which was a proposal by the U.S. President Donald Trump at the beginning of the conflict in 2023, early 2024. It was rejected. That was the stance by Egypt. That was the stance by His Excellency President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi. And on the other hand, move on 2 years later, moving forward in 2025, in the past 2 weeks, we have seen President al-Sisi standing alongside the American president with the proposal to be ending the war. How did we keep this balance in relations between Egypt and the United States despite the conflicting ideas and proposals?
It's a successful diplomacy led by President Fattah al-Sisi and his Foreign Minister Badr Abdel-Ati. It was a very successful step despite the conflict between and even the pressures, U.S. pressures. But Egypt stopped it and refused all the ways and even the pressures to agree on displacement and even to say that this is the misery of the Palestinians, open up all the regions, take them to Sinai or any other place. So Egypt was aware that this is an Israeli plan, and it's aware that this will not be in favor of the Palestinians' side or interests. And that's why Egypt refused from the very beginning any kind of plans or pressures to put them or displace the Palestinians. And in fact, I must say that Palestinians as well, despite of all the starvation and all the strikes and the way to terrorize them, stayed in the country or their land and didn't leave Gaza Strip, despite of the whole destruction made by the Israeli government or forces.
Yes, and finally, Doctor, how do you see the future of the bilateral ties between Egypt and the United States under both Presidents al-Sisi and Donald Trump? Especially in Sharm el-Sheikh, President Trump described President al-Sisi as a great friend, as a great leader, as a great general. Several times he said that.
I think that Egypt and US know that they need each other. Egypt is a major player in the Middle East and in Africa as well, as we said. And US knows very well that no stability in the Middle East unless there is a stability in Egypt, and it knows even despite any kind of differences or gaps in points of view. I think that US knows that and appreciates the Egyptian role and significant role, especially in the Palestinian cause, and knows that no one can replace Egypt's role in bringing peace and stability to the Middle East. And that's why, despite any differences or possible differences between Washington and DC and Egypt and Cairo, there will be always a connection, contacts, cooperation and coordination between both countries or both capitals to make sure that this region is stable and things are done in the best way possible in the favor of the region and its inhabitants.
Yes, Dr. Yasser Thabet, the journalist and the political analyst, thank you very much for being with us tonight on the Daily Debate.
It's a pleasure.
Pleasure is all mine, and this brings us to the end of the Daily Debate for tonight. Thank you for watching, and goodbye.